Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast, brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. I'm Jack Flintham and I'm joined today by Steven Railston. Steve, how are we?
Not bad, thank you, Jack. Although I still felt a bit groggy on Monday, because the hangover seemed the last 2 days these days after going out on Saturday. So I had one too many coffees at the game last night, and I don't think I got to sleep until probably around 2:30, 3 o'clock. So apart from that, I'm all right.
Oh dear! I mean, after what you witnessed last night, I'm surprised you were able to stay awake, because that second half really was a bit of a killer. But we'll get into that, shall we? To kick things off, it was, well, a bit of behind the scenes on the podcast, but you create a little script to keep us on the straight and narrow, don't you, Steve? And the first bullet point just says, "What was that?" And I think that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? It was not necessarily what we were expecting to see from United based on current form.
Call a spade a spade. That was shocking, absolutely shocking. To play most of the game against 10 men Everton and still not be able to score a goal is awful. Everton had won just once at United in the Premier League in the last 32 years. Moyes had not won in 17 attempts as a visiting manager, but I guess he'll argue it was worth the wait, obviously being successful on his 18th attempt, because from an Everton perspective, to win that game with just 10 men after Garnegay's sending off in the 13th minute, it's fantastic for them. But from a United perspective, that was shocking. It's such a huge opportunity when that sending off happened. Obviously, he'd only recorded one clean sheet in the Premier League this season against Sunderland. And you just thought, right, well, this is a massive chance. Go on and win the game, put Everton to the sword. But it didn't really change the momentum of the game, the sending off. Everton had started as the better side. They were on the front foot, and they continued to be in the ascendancy even after that sending off. United lacked control. There was some really bad individual performances. The passing was sloppy. Amorim got his changes wrong. We'll get on to that. It was just a really, really bad night. And these are the games United need to be winning if they want to qualify for the Champions League. We heaped the praise on Amorim in October, deservedly so. He was named Manager of the Month. Obviously, November started with 2 draws against Nottingham Forest and Tottenham, but there were still some positives to take from those matches because of the way they salvaged points at the end of those games. But this was a huge setback. This was a massive step back. I think every fan who was at the game last night, they would have just left Old Trafford scratching their heads thinking, these results were supposed to be a thing of the past. We thought these bad results were behind this team after a very good turnaround in the last 6 weeks or so. Obviously, United were undefeated in 5, and it was just shocking. It was really bad.
Yeah, and we'll just we'll go through the game in detail. But you mentioned there about the red card. It was, I personally haven't seen such an incident live before. Obviously, there's the famous Newcastle incident with Bowyer and Dyer. It was utterly bizarre, wasn't it, really? And it kind of handed the game on a plate to United, but they couldn't take it.
Yeah, obviously Lee Bowyer and Kieran Dyer was in 2005, but they were both swinging for each other. This was slightly different because Garnegay, I'm not actually sure, and David Moyes said this in his press conference, who was upset and what Garnegay was actually complaining about. I think Moyes had said Garnegay had come into the dressing room and apologised, but they hadn't got into actually discussing what it was about. Obviously, Fernandez it took a shot from the edge of the box, and I think at that point we were all looking down at our laptops, and I think even the TV cameras had looked away. It was just a completely off the ball, completely strange and bizarre incident, really. And obviously, the referee straight red card. Jordan Pickford had to get involved. He was holding them back. He was obviously incredibly frustrated going to get at that point. I think after watching the replays, it was probably a little bit harsh. The bottom line is, though, he raised his hands. And if you raise your hand, it's obviously considered as violent conduct. And by the letter of the law, the referee then has no choice but to send them off. Moyes said, look, he thought it was harsh. And even Ruben Amorim said in his press conference that he disagreed with it. He said he would like his players to fight. I wouldn't say they didn't show fight in the last part of the game. I wouldn't say they didn't show the desire to try turn it around, but the quality was just not there on Monday night. The approach was really strange. I mean, there was a lot of crosses that went into the box. Obviously, Xerxes was leading the line. I think Delay had picked up on the lack of urgency. And I think the way you've got to break down Everton in those scenarios is you've got to be patient. You've got to pass around the ball around the edge of the box, obviously with more pace, and wait for that moment, which will inevitably come against 10 men. But United didn't have control at any stage of that game. They didn't look like they had a man advantage, which is so worrying. And you're right, if you go, if there's a red card at that stage of match in the 13th minute at home against Everton, you've got to go and win that game. So bad from a United perspective. Really disappointing.
Yeah, just on the red card, I have seen the replays back, and I think what might have happened, I might be wrong, is that I think Gana Gay's unhappy because he plays a pass and Keane's just kind of stood on his heels and just kind of watches it go past him, and then the shot goes off. And I think that's what led to the argument. But as you say, it was a complete sort of head loss, wasn't it, from the midfielder? And I think Jordan Pickford kind of saved him from maybe turning into a Kieran Dyer Lee Bowyer instant, because he did well to restrain his teammate there.
But from that moment, United have got to have control. They've got to dominate the ball, make the extra man advantage count, and they didn't do that. It was like a basketball match, back to front. Everton were counter-attacking with purpose, and Dyer looked pretty good down the right. We all expected him to look pretty sharp. He's been really good this season. Grealish was involved on the left. They didn't look like they had a man sent off, which is a joke, really, from a United perspective. And then the goal itself from Dewsbury Hall, there's so much wrong with the goal. It was just the one simple pass from James Garner in between Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes was far too passive. I think some of the players in red shirts almost looked disinterested. Fernandes almost jogged. Lenny Yoro didn't commit to the challenge. That was really weak. He wasn't aggressive enough. And then Senna Lomans, we've praised him so much, and rightly so, because he's made such a good impact. He's delivered some really confident performances, and he's been fantastic since making his debut against Sunderland. But he should have saved that. His starting position was really disappointing, and it let him down. It made it impossible to get across. If you look at the replay, he was far too to the right to his goal. The shot itself, upon first glance, I actually thought, what a stunning goal. But then when you watched it back, you realised it was very savable. It wasn't actually in the top corner. Lomans should have done better. He'll be disappointed with that, and he'll concede himself when he sees it back that he should have done better. He probably would have realised at the time. So just individual performances, there was some really bad displays all over the pitch, but there's no excuses to lose against 10 men Everton. It's really bad.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, obviously, we talk about the goal, and Lomans should have done better. Yoro's tackle was pretty naff as well. But even then, you still felt second half changes made. They should be able to push on and make more of the attacking threats in the second half, but it just didn't come. What did you make of Amorim's in-game management? Because it didn't feel like the substitutions really helped United at all.
Well, I thought Mount had a decent impact when he came on at half-time, and I thought that change made sense. Obviously, Mazraoui started at right wing-back, and he was pretty disappointing, didn't offer much at all. We've talked about how specialist these positions are at wing-back, and Mazraoui is not a wing-back. So obviously Mount came on, Ahmad was relocated. And then before the hour mark, obviously Amorim made two more changes. And I think that's where he got his changes wrong for me, because Minu and Dalot came on for Casemiro and Dorgu, which meant three centre-backs played the entire game. Yoro, De Ligt, Shaw. And if you're chasing the game against 10-man Everton, do you really need three centre-halves on the pitch? No. Amorim needed to change the system there. And we know he's wedded to this system. We know he's not going to change. And perhaps his stubbornness was the reason that he ignored the solution. Because for me, the solution... Look, Casemiro had a bad game. I might come on to that. I'm using the word bad a lot, but it was such a terrible performance. Could Casemiro have stayed on the pitch? Yoro had come off for Manu. So obviously one less defender on the pitch, but Casemiro could have kind of filled in. He's still a midfielder, but he would have had Casemiro, Fernandes and Manu on. And that would have given you surely a better chance to get back into the game. I don't think the changes worked. I think it's like I say, I think his in-game management in that sense was pretty disappointing. So he's got to take responsibility for that. Amorim said that in his press conference, he will take responsibility, but also the players have to look at themselves because, I mean, even Fernandes was complaining at the end of the match, I think, to the referee about something, but he's got to look at himself after that. He was really disappointing, Fernandes. Some really poor passes. And I think sometimes when you watch United last season, and I mean even in seasons before that, if Fernandes had underperformed, the team had tended to struggle. He had an off day, like many did last night. Yeah,
and just interesting there, you say about the formation, and we've talked at length about Amorim and his system and wanting to stick with the system, and a lot said that one of the issues with Erik ten Hag was he was chopping and changing too much, and it was never set. But when you're in a game like that, how important is it to have that sort of versatility where you can become a bit more attacking, maybe move back to a 4 and push forward a bit better to cause Everton some problems?
Yeah, of course you've got to adapt, especially in scenarios like this. It's evident. I mean, the performance was kind of reminiscent of the days of Louis van Gaal, where United really struggled to break down teams at home. They might have a bit of the ball, but were kind of devoid of creativity in the final third. And if Yoro had come off, for example, and had taken off a centre half, I mean, Amorim talks about his formation, and he talks about, if you actually look at the positions during a game, it might not necessarily reflect the starting formation that we will see, for example, on a graphic. But they still had another centre half on the pitch. They still had 3 defenders on the pitch at the back, and obviously the wing backs as well. So I think United would have had a better chance to win that game if Amorim had made that change. But if he had and he changed his system, then everyone would say, well, why hadn't he changed his system beforehand? Why are you doing it now? You're not going to do it all the time. So you leave yourself open to that. And I think that probably came into his thinking. And you have to be adaptable as a manager. And United needs to be beating teams like Everton with 10 men on the pitch. They should be taking risks. They should be throwing bodies forward. It didn't feel that urgent. Obviously, at the end, there was a few chances, but it was just not good enough.
And you say about those few chances, they seem to fall to a man who we didn't particularly expect to start. Obviously, there was injuries to Sesko and Cunha. But Joshua Zirkzee got his opportunity, and it's probably fair to say he hasn't really changed anyone's mind, has he?
Yeah, his first start of the season, he probably showed why that was his first start of the season, I think, Zirkzee. He'd obviously played 90 minutes and 5 substitute appearances, as we discussed on the preview podcast. Amorim made the decision for Zirkzee to start down the middle. He wasn't involved really at all in the first half. As you said, and as we just discussed there briefly, there was a few chances towards the end of the game. There was, to be fair to Zirkzee, he drew a decent save from Jordan Pickford with a header. But when you look at the defenders that Everton had on the pitch, they're a very physical team. They were so happy just to receive balls into the box. They can deal with them all day. Michael Keane, James Tarkowski. There was a moment in the first half when Tarkowski had pushed Zirkzee to the floor and an off-the-ball incident, and obviously Zirkzee wasn't very happy, understandably so. But I think Everton's defenders had his number throughout the match. Zirkzee's not physical enough for the Premier League. He's not short of height. He's relatively tall, but he doesn't win many headers. He doesn't really use his frame intelligently when a long ball is played up the top of the pitch. So yeah, a disappointing performance. He's just not good enough to lead the line for United. But we already know that, and that's why he hasn't been. Obviously, Sesko has been ruled out for, it sounds like maybe a fortnight or up to 3 weeks. Ironically, that game would have suited Sesko, he would have had a better chance on getting on the end of the crosses. But you have to question that approach, because that's what Everton wanted. As I've just said, they could deal with that all day. And it was interesting watching the kind of tactical battle in the opening exchanges, because in the first 5 minutes, Everton were pressing very high. They were playing a very high line, pressing aggressively and wanting Senna Lommins to play the ball long. And I think that had clearly been discussed in the United camp, because Lommins was going short on a few occasions, and we've praised United for going long in this good run during October. So there was a slight change of approach there, because obviously Ruben Amorim would have recognised that Everton were going to win the majority of the long balls, especially with Sesko not on the pitch. It was going to be difficult, and it was.
Yeah, and it's just before we break off there, I think I remember Amorim saying prior to the Liverpool game that he chose Cunha over Sesko because he felt that Van Dijk and Konate, they were quite confident in just winning headers and that sort of direct approach. He wanted to try something a bit different, and it worked. Obviously, he didn't have Cunha to choose from. Was you surprised then that he didn't decide to play maybe Mbeumo in that sort of false nine role and then play Mount and Ahmad behind him?
Yeah, I think that's the approach. I would have started Mount. I said that on the preview podcast. I thought he was decent when he came on. Obviously created a chance for Fernandes with that pullback. But we're talking about kind of the changes during the game and the mismatches, perhaps Everton having the dominance with the aerial balls. But the bottom line is United had an extra man for 77 minutes, and they didn't make use of that advantage. It's criminal, really. They had enough on the pitch. They should have had enough on the pitch to control that match and create chances. And there wasn't really any clear-cut opportunities when you think about it. I mean, Mbeumo obviously had a chance. Pickford saved, but it was down Pickford's throat. And then Mount had a chance. It kind of flashed around the post. And look, that Fernandes chance was probably the best of the game for me, when he was very close range and he fired it way over the bar. But they had to create way more opportunities than they did against the 10-man Everton. Just, again, so bad.
Yeah, right. We'll take a break there. We'll let Steve have a little bit of a breather and get back into it in the second half. Right, welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, one of the talking points prior to kick-off, other than the attack, was who was going to start at left wing-back, whether it be Patrick Dorgu or Diogo Dalot. Obviously, Dorgu had quite a good international break, personally, even if his country didn't qualify automatically for the World Cup. He got the nod. What did you make of his performance?
I hope anyone listening to this podcast they can play a drinking game, and when I say so bad, they can take a sip. It'll probably be full of coffee or full of beer by now if they've been doing so. Yeah, it's probably worth talking about Dorgu, isn't it? Because the wing-back roles, as I said, with Asraoui, are so specialist, and they're very important to this system working. And Dorgu retained his starting role as expected after starting against Tottenham. And I said on the preview podcast, with Dorgu and Dalot this season on the left, there's been nothing between them, because they've both been pretty unconvincing down that side. And when people have watched Dorgu start, they've wanted Dalot to start. And when people have watched Dalot start, and they wanted Dorgu to start. And Dorgu, it was just another bad night. Wasn't much going. I mean, defensively, he was disappointing, and Dye came down his side a lot. And then going forward, his end product it needs to be improved. You can't be starting at United and offer so little as a wing back in the final third. There was a chance, obviously, after Everton had taken the lead, when I think it was Xerxes who played the ball into the box, and Dorgu was at the back post. And it wasn't the easiest chance in the world, but he had to get it on target. You just have to keep it down, strike the ball low, get your head over the ball, and get it on target. And look, we've made the point multiple times that he's young. He's come from Lecce. He obviously only arrived in January, so he's not even had a full calendar yet at the club, but he's obviously into his second season. Dorgu admitted when I spoke to him in August that, look, it was difficult coming into that struggling dressing room. Of course it would have been, and that's understandable. but he has to be performing better than he is now. If he is starting games, he must perform better. It was a disappointing performance. It wasn't a surprise to see him taken off. Dalot didn't really have to do much to be an improvement when he came on. And that position's a problem for me. I think they've got to sign someone at left wing back next summer, at the end of the season. As I said, Ahmad's made the right wing back role his own, and he looks very good there. But the left side is hugely important. It's just as important. And Dalot and Dorgu are not good enough to be starting at left wing back. I think, as I've said multiple times with Dalot, look, if he's on the right, yeah, fantastic, and he'll work his socks off, but he's not comfortable on the left.
Just playing devil's advocate a bit there. Obviously, they did sign Diego Leon as well, who's obviously he's young, but they might see that as, oh no, is that it? For those listening, Steve just shook his head profusely there. Not the option, not now at least. Anyway,
no. The reason why I was shaking my head, obviously, Leon, 18 years old, came from Paraguay. Impressed when he came in pre-season in first team training sessions, but he's very raw. He is very raw. He's obviously been playing under 21 football. I've seen him in the flesh quite a few times now. He's gradually finding his feet. He's gradually getting better, but he's not cut for the Premier League at the moment, unfortunately. No. Dorgu would obviously be way ahead of Leon at this point, and we're scrutinising Dorgu and saying that he needs to improve certain areas. So look, maybe Leon's one for the future, but he's still got a long way to go, and yeah, it wouldn't be the right thing to do to put him in right now.
No. So yeah, another area of the pitch that
shot that one down quickly.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? Another area of the pitch that didn't impress, which feels, as you say, a pretty common theme this morning, is the midfield. Now, Casemiro and Fernandes have kind of nailed down that central midfield in recent weeks, and we've praised Casemiro particularly a lot. They were pretty poor stuff again, weren't it?
Well, this is why I've said they can't give Casemiro a contract extension, because although he's become important again and he's delivered some brilliant performances, this season has to be a swan song for me. They just have to be ruthless, part ways, best for both parties, in my opinion. Hopefully he can go out on a high, secure Champions League qualification, and that'll be a fitting way to bow out. But I don't think Casemiro can continue. He's 33 years old. He's not looked like a 33-year-old for the first few weeks of this season, but he did last night. And he's going to be 34 in the new year before the end of the campaign. So that's why I don't think he should be given a new deal, because it's questionable how, when I've watched Casemiro in the last few weeks, obviously look fantastic, but how long can he actually sustain that level for at his age? His lack of mobility was evident last night. But again, as I said, I think it still would have made more sense to have removed the centre half and kept Casemiro on the pitch. And look, he could have dropped back and kind of acted in that role. It could have been a bit fluid. I think that would have made more sense. And United could have controlled the game better with three midfielders on the pitch, Menu, Casemiro and Fernandes. So, yeah, and as you said, Fernandes, discussed before, had a bad game as well. That chance when Mount pulled it back was particularly disappointing. That for me was probably the biggest opportunity of the game. I probably need to watch it back. I'm not actually quite sure what the angle was, but upon first glance, it looked like a really bad miss. So Fernandes, he's got such high standards, and that's why he's probably judged to a high standard. We know what he's capable of, and that was a really disappointing display from him in the middle.
Yeah, it was a weird one for Fernandes, because we often praise so much his sort of composure in those sort of positions, but he really snatched at it and kind of went for the outside of his boot, which seemed odd. Who are we to tell Fernandes how to finish? But it just seemed like an odd choice, and not really a surprise when you attempt that and it goes spiraling over the crossbar. But I suppose just to reflect where that leaves United, they're 10th in the table. It's technically a little bit of a false position, because it is still only 3 points off the top four. Obviously, a lot of teams above them also lost this weekend, Liverpool, City and Spurs, to name a few. It was a big chance, though, to make that table look a lot brighter than it has done for quite some time, though, wasn't it?
And that's what makes this result even worse. against 10 men because there was a huge opportunity there to climb into the Champions League places. They would have climbed to fifth with a win. I think if United had won by 4 more goals, they would have climbed to fourth. Obviously, probably unlikely, but there was a huge chance there to go up to fifth. And then once you're in those Champions League places, you're approaching the winter schedule. And look, they would have been undefeated in 6. They would have had a lot of momentum. And it was such a missed opportunity. And that's why this podcast has been hugely positive in the last 8 weeks or so, because some really good performances in October. And as I said, Amorim was deservedly named manager of the month. But when they perform badly, you've got to call a spade a spade. And last night was really bad. And in the context of the Premier League table, as you've said, it makes it worse. So the players will know that. They'll be incredibly disappointed. Amorim looked disappointed in his post-match address, and he's got to find a response now. He found a response in October, produced answers that we probably didn't expect. It seemed unlikely that there would be a turnaround, but there was. But they've got to bounce back after this now. And look, it's Crystal Palace on Sunday down at Selhurst Park. 12 o'clock kick-off on a Sunday, which is...
Don't get us started on that one.
It's just a disgrace, isn't it? I mean, even for the travelling, from our perspective, obviously, but travelling fans getting down there to Croydon, it's terrible. But that's already looking difficult now. Palace are a very good team, very well organised under Glasner. We'll talk about that a bit later in the week. And that will be on the preview podcast. But it's looking difficult now. But Amorim has to find a response, and an investigation will be launched this week at Carrington, because the lack of quality was really concerning. The lack of urgency. There was the big opportunity at home at Old Trafford, especially after the red card, and the players did not help the crowd in any way, shape or form to really get going. There was boos at the full-time whistle, and you can't blame supporters for that.
Yeah, and how much, I just wonder, how much is it partially down to having those sort of performances where you've come back from the international break and you potentially, it's still a little bit in that mindset. I struggle to kind of make
you
that
can
as an
say
excuse.
That, but not against 10 men Everton.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and also I suppose you could argue that United had longer than any of the other Premier League teams, obviously kicking off on Monday night as well, which makes it even more disappointing. And that's just the overall sense, isn't it, from Monday's game, is just disappointment.
Yeah, crap performance, really bad. And they need to bounce back, yeah.
Yeah, so looking ahead, try and build a bit of positivity. There could be a couple of returns for United going into Sunday, Cunha and Maguire. What do you think the likelihood is of seeing either man travel down to London this weekend?
Well, for anyone who didn't know, my friend had actually given us a text, because I think he was going to the game. He hadn't realised that Cunha was potentially not going to be involved. Obviously, Cunha and Maguire were missing. They came out of the team, which opened the door for Yoro and Xerxes to start. If Cunha and Maguire are fit, they should come straight back into the starting team on Sunday. I think obviously we discussed Yoro there, and with briefly in the goal, but it was a real backward step, that performance from Yoro. He lacks aggression sometimes with those challenges. I don't think he goes in hard enough sometimes. So look, an area for improvement. I think Maguire would have Maguire starting over Yoro this weekend if he's available. But with Cunha, it was the incident on Saturday night, wasn't it, when Altrincham Christmas lights were going on, getting switched on, and Matheus Cunha was supposed to be going down, switching them on, and it turned out that I think the organisers of the event, I was out at this point. I didn't realise I was probably around 7 pints in. I think it was quite late on Saturday night. But the organisers of the event had said that Matheus Cunha had suffered a training accident, I think was the terminology used. So everyone kind of was wondering what had happened, and United sources communicated that it was a minor injury, but it was enough to prevent them from turning up
on the stage.
These Christmas lights. So yeah, I mean, I did think at the time, just saying that to get Matheus out of this arrangement, but he was absent from the squad in the end. It sounds like it's nothing serious, so he should maybe a concussion. So it sounds like he should be back at the squad on the weekend. But yeah, he'd come back in to the team. Obviously, Sandro Martinez was back in the squad after 9 months off, as we expected. It was good to see him on the bench. He received warm applause as he emerged to warm up. So fantastic for Martinez from a personal perspective to be back involved and around the team on a match day, because he's been out for so long. And Shea Lacey was in the squad as well. So a huge moment for Shea Lacey, 18 years old. Some really good progress this season. Last season, he was carefully handled to prevent a repeat of an injury. The club were just kind of wrapping him up in cotton wool a bit, kind of targeting a good pre-season for Lacey. He contributed during the post-season tour in both of those matches, and wasn't included in the United States travelling squad, but he's delivered some really consistently strong performances this season, and that was his reward, being involved in that squad. That was great to see, and hopefully it's the first of many inclusions for Lacey, because he's got a really high ceiling, but he's got to be given the opportunity. I think he'd be very good in one of those number 10 roles. I wasn't convinced watching that game last night that Lacey, a young lad in that environment, would have made a huge difference. I think some people thought he might have got a kick, but again, it's what I've said with Leon. These kids are very young. Whether or not it's the right time to put him in that match, I'm not so sure. But he will be ready when called upon in the next few weeks, if needed. I'm pretty sure of that, because he is performing very well in the academy.
Definitely, and you'd like to think that maybe if United get a favourable draw in the FA Cup in January, that could be a good opportunity for him and maybe a few others to get their chance in the United squad. But yeah, just before we finish then, mentioned it a little bit earlier about Palace coming up on Sunday. It looked difficult before. It looks even more difficult now. Is there any crumb of comfort United fans can take going into this one?
Well, obviously, Kuna and Maguire could come back, which is a boost. But after a performance like that, to lose against 10 men, there's no excuse really. You can't turn around and say, well, Matthias Kuna was injured, Harry Maguire was out, Benjamin Sesko was out. United had to win that game. They didn't. And as I said, Amorim needs to find a response now. He did in October. Fantastic month. But this winter, the games will come thick and fast. United are going to be playing 2 games a week. They hadn't at the start of this season. And the schedule's a lot busier, and that's going to ask different questions of them, and they need to respond. It's hugely important. But as you've said, that game does look tricky now. It does look like another potential banana skin. So it's going to be fascinating going down to Selhurst Park on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll preview all of that in more detail on Friday when the pod returns. In the meantime, you can catch all the reaction, if you can stomach it, on the Manchester Evening News website.